And we're recording now.
Okay, so I called the Historic Resources Commission meeting June 11th at 6 p.m. And if we could do the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to call a moment of silence, and in this moment, if you will also remember Jerry and his family, please. Okay. We have the minutes of the May 14th meeting. Do I have a motion to accept those minutes?
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes of the May 14th.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Okay, passes. Thank you very much. We have the Facade grant matrix draft criteria. So I'm not for sure which one of you want to go over it, or both of you, if you would like to go over what you all have created.
Full disclosure, I didn't.
Okay.
We attempted.
We attempted,
we
yes.
attempted, and
We couldn't get together on the same day, so we did it in 2 parts.
Okay,
got in the way.
Yes.
that's fine.
But we got something thanks to Alexa's
if-
help.
If Alexis or one of you want to go over it, someone
Sure, I'll just
grab the reins.
do the highlights of each of the categories.
Okay.
We identified it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 11 categories, and feel free to, as you're reviewing each of these, if there are any that you feel should be removed or tweaked in any way, please make a note of that, and then once we're at the end, we can go through each section. So the level of rehabilitation was based on minor versus major COA types of things. So starting with normal maintenance, then moving into minor projects, then rehabilitation, repair and replacement types of work, and then rehabilitation, and then major rehabilitation being the highest priority of this commission, given that's really the intent of these facade grant funds, is to rehabilitate larger projects. And then we also thought it was important to know whether that person or applicant had received funds from this commission before. I think one of the statements in the application itself formally said priority would be given to newer or people who had not applied before, and so giving some additional points attributed to those that had not been an applicant before. We also thought the aesthetic of...
Can I go back to that?
Sure.
Just for a question and a thought. So when we have these buildings that are owned by another person, and then they have renters, so the renters can apply, is that correct, for the grant?
The renters can apply.
Okay. So if the building itself has had a grant to it before, is that considered that? Is it considered that it has had a grant, or is it, or are you looking at the person that's standing before us? That's the question I have.
The question says the applicant has previously received funding. So my interpretation of that would be that individual has requested funding before and has received funding before.
Okay, thank you.
So it follows the applicant, not the structure.
Right, so if there was a multi-use building, say Jason's building,
Sure.
and Volt wanted it, but Hi-Fi had already gotten one, it wouldn't negate that individual Volt's ability to get extra points for not having applied before.
Okay, thank you.
Plus, if the person is a renter, they have to have the building owner's approval signature as well. So that
part of
kind
the
of stands, that kind of supports whoever comes before us. Is that,
So I'm continuing on this, I'm sorry.
It's fine.
Another thought process, and that is, and I was trying to think in the past history, and I can't think of anything, but we can have two renters in the same building both apply for monies. Is that correct?
Yes, but it's per lot. So if you have them apply in the same year, you can pick one or the other, or if they don't total the $5,000, they could each get the amount if it's under 5,000 total combined
Mm-hmm.
monies. So that becomes a little bit,
So is that outlined?
it's outlined in the application.
It is outlined in the application, so they understand that.
Yes, it's per zoning law.
Thank you.
We also thought it was important to look at how the changes that are being proposed in the project affect the aesthetics of the downtown and the historic district and contribute to the character. This was somewhat in line with what we talked about in renovations, but a little bit different in that it's more along the lines of how it improves the aesthetics versus the actual historic
Mm-hmm.
nature of the building. And the highest being it changes, it improves the whole district, the district as a whole, versus a smaller project. Paint, for example, may not change the nature of downtown. Project visibility, we kind of went back and forth on this one, even internally, in terms of either location of the project, if it's part of a gateway into downtown or on a major thoroughfare that's very visible. Are those projects you guys want to prioritize over other ones that may be on a Maple Street or one of the other avenues that isn't listed on North Main, South Main, Hardin, Court Square, Elm? So I'm open to feedback on.
Yeah, I'm a little up in the air on that, just due to, for me, if they are like stabilizing a building, like, and it's on the alleyway or something, but it's going to make that building more, sustainable for the downtown, they might get a low rating here that would bump them out of the grant because it's not visible.
but isn't this meant to be front facade? I didn't know we were considering anything that wasn't the front of the building.
thought-
So we have in the past considered rear and alley
Right.
stuff, but it was listed in the application that those were lesser priority, which
Okay.
is how I came up with, or we came up with that hierarchy, so to speak. But
Okay.
I mean,
And I guess they would get higher points under the first category,
That's true.
level of rehabilitation. If it
That's
were
true.
something
You're
that
right. So
substantial.
it levels itself out.
and we could, at the end of this, as an exercise, come up with a general concept for a couple projects and score them out and see how
See how it scores
scoring
out. Yeah.
levels out, and if that's in kind of in the line of how you want them to.
We want it to work out.
Yeah. We also thought about community impact. Does it have the ability to support a brand new business to town, support the expansion of a existing business? does it support an existing business, or it has minimal effect on any of those categories. And this next category, did anyone have any? Okay. All right, I'll go back. So our next category was contractor and vendor quotes. This was a topic that was brought up last year, and a few of the commission members identified wanting to see quotes from outside of the applicant themselves. So this was sort of a compromise that when talking with Frankie about how to implement this, his recommendation was, if we're going to go down this route, to, instead of saying it's a requirement, to give additional points if you go above and beyond and have an additional contractor beside yourself as a quoting person.
I'm in the air about all this. I feel like we have some businesses that do their own work. Seems to me it's kind of not real ethical for them to go and ask two people to come and quote on a job that they're not going to do anyway. And it's wasting their time, both people's time, on doing that work. I think if we somehow do where they justify their pricing so that we know that they're doing due diligence in the cost that they're presenting to us. I'm not too, I don't know, I think I'm more about the project and what the project's all about, not necessarily about the quotes. I get the idea that we want, I don't think that sometimes you always take the bottom quote anyway. You know, I mean, I know we don't.
For this purpose, we do, though. We require at the lowest quote
Right.
is what we reimburse up to 50% of.
Right. The quote thing is, I'm kind of on the fence.
I like the quote thing because it lets you know that if they're all pretty much, they're not all going to be exactly, we'll say $1,000, but at the same time, if one's 11, one's 950, one's 1,000, you know, they're pretty much in line with each other in the same ballpark. So
I'm just saying, like,
like
if you
the
were a contractor and you're going to do the
but
work
most
yourself,
contractors and people will tell you they spend more time giving quotes out than doing the work, and they know they're not going to get called. I mean, every one of them I talk to say, you know, we know we're not going to get half or 2/3 of the people.
Yeah, it just seems a
Well, they
kinda
know
weird
it's
to
going to
me.
waste their money. It's just, I mean, you know, they're wasting their time for most of the quotes, but that's just business. All of
it
my
just
talk
seems a
to say
little
that.
weird. I don't know how many contractors want to call another contractor and say, come over here and quote for me. I don't know how ethical that is. I just, that just seems,
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be the contractor requesting the quote, it's the business requesting the quote. I think
The
where,
applicant.
yeah, the applicant requesting the quote.
what if the applicant is the contractor? That's what I'm saying. I mean, I get if you're just a renter and getting a quote, but if the applicant is a contractor, and we have several businesses that, you know, have been built that are contractors. I just have a problem with saying to that contractor, you have to get 2 quotes, or, you know, you don't get 5 points.
We are required to ask for 2 quotes at least because we're a government agency, whether or not they're quotes that are something that the applicant is the contractor also is just aside. But
Well, for that very reason, because this is taxpayer money, because this is a grant from the city, I think we would be smart to exercise due diligence by saying, okay, if you're the contractor and the business owner and the applicant, and you want to do the business and submit a quote, fine, but then provide to us another independent quote. I think we at least owe that to the process. And whether or not we choose the business owner / contractor's bid and award accordingly, I think the optics are not great if we don't make some sort of a requirement of the applicant in terms of independent quoting.
Mm.
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, we're not selecting the contractor they use.
No,
Yeah,
so
that's their choice.
they're still able to, even if they quote themselves and they also get 2 other quotes.
Sure.
They are not
Not
required
bound
to
to
go to those other
Right.
2 quotes. They can
Right.
still do the work themselves. It's just the lowest price is what
Is what
is
you're
what
we're
we're
looking at.
reimbursing up to the 50%.
Right.
It prohibits a contractor from giving you a higher price because they're the only one.
Right, I understand that, and that's why I'm saying the justifying the price.
Right.
I get that, and I get that's why you're looking at a quote.
We could change the scoring to allow that, providing 2 quotes to be a 4 and 2 independent quotes to be a 5, so it's only a 1-point difference. I mean,
So Alexa, on this matrix where it says only 1 quote, only 2 quote, so if we specify in the scoring system 2 independent quotes, or, insert a little terminology in there that, at least 2 independent quotes or something. I'm not sure how we go about telling the applicant that they're required to have quotes that aren't, where the work isn't being done by a family member or something like
the
that.
asterisk.
Well, it has it
It
here.
has an explanation.
It
Oh,
does
sorry,
explain.
sorry.
Yeah,
Well, who
it-
didn't
so
cover
it does says it.
Okay.
It's on the last.
The language specifically says,
So-
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, I see. Oh, I apologize, okay. Quotes must come from, okay. Oh, yay. All right, so there's your.
Explanation. I would agree with Elaine's comments that since we're sort of fiduciaries of the taxpayer money, we should be doing our, or at least acting as a good fiduciary and requiring more than 1 quote.
I think that's already required.
It's already required, but 2 quotes, but
The point in question is that if you get 2 independent, you get 1 additional point higher than someone who's also provided 2 quotes. So if I'm understanding Chairman Terry correctly, what he is discussing is that fair to those business owners, property owners, who are also contractors, to not receive that extra point? Where somebody who's a property owner or business owner, they don't have that contracting skill set or company, they go out and get 2 independent ones, they're now going to get 1 point higher than said company who has a contractor who's providing their quote.
Right. Sure. Thank you.
You see, that's not fair.
That's not
No, I don't think it's fair.
I mean, I think I don't mind the 1 quote and the 2 quotes. I just have the 5 points for 2 independent quotes. I think that you're penalizing somebody because they're a contractor.
Mhm. That's the way it comes across to me.
So how
Because
about
what
the
we're
flip
trying to
side?
do is we're trying to see how much a project costs. So if they get an independent quote, and this kind of explains that it has to be an independent quote, you're
to get that to get those additional points, I'm
To
going
get
to
the
flip
second.
that on its head for being a negative to being a way to get you do a little bit extra is to go out and get an additional quote. If you are a contractor, you get some additional points, or if you aren't a contractor, you get those points. You know, I don't know.
Well, I was kind of looking at it more as leveling the playing field for a business owner that does not have a contractor in their organization or in their family. You have business owners that don't have that. So they don't have that choice. They can only go to independent quotes.
I know, but you're still just looking at two quotes, two people saying this is how much the project is going to be. So if one of them is the owner, if we require them to get the second quote, I think we just need to change that a little bit, the wording, but the second quote would have to be a non-family member instead of doing where you have that both quotes are non-family members, right? Or am I reading it wrong? I'm trying to read and talk at the same time, but allowing that the two quotes, if they go ahead and do two quotes, one is them and one is a independent.
So that's, if
That
one
would-
is them and one is independent, that falls under two quotes provided to me. That additional,
Yeah, there's no restriction.
I mean, you can't have two quotes from themselves.
No,
so.
I know that, but what I meant, well, the way you have it though is two quotes provided. You are kind of saying that, aren't you? Because then the third one is at least two independent quotes. So two quotes provided and then two independent quotes almost say that.
Those aren't, two quotes are provided plus two other independent. Right. It's one additional or total of two independent.
Right.
But I don't know if I'm confused.
I get what you're saying, but I guess I'm just saying I would rather take the last one out where it's two independent quotes and just have two quotes, and that could be two independent quotes or it could be one contractor quote and one independent quote.
My recommendation is if you don't want the independent quotes considered, just take out that whole column because otherwise the requirement is to have two quotes already.
Right.
So
But what if those two quotes are both family? I mean, like two sons. I have two sons. They're both contractors, and that's who I go to. I think there should be some extra credit for me going to your husband or somebody outside the family. I think there should be some extra credit.
Can I speak?
You went out.
you go up there.
So we don't have any downtown business owners or contractors here tonight to speak
that
for them. So I just would like to speak on the behalf of those business owners, property owners who are also contractors. What's presented before you is to make sure that the process is followed consistently so that they need to have two quotes. At the end of the day, a quote A is going to show a price of the work. Quote B is going to show the price of the work. If it's family, cousin, what is the process is two different quotes. How is it the place to govern what business they decide to get a quote from?
Good point.
Because I think any familiar, whatever it is, family, is going to be swayed. An outside independent person is going to be not so swayed.
How can you
But
make
it could say they could be best friends and they're not family. I mean, I could get a quote from Ken. He's not my family.
I think we could
But that's what I'm saying.
go all day on that.
I know, but
But
that's
I
what
do
I
think
was trying to say. It's
If
a
you're the
hard
applicant
decision.
And you've already seen the other quote that somebody else provided to you, they can do $1 less and it not be an accurate representation of what their cost is. Their cost could be significantly lower than that. They came in $1 less.
Sure.
I'm just being devil's advocate here.
Possible.
I'm not saying that we have anyone that's doing that though.
I
Right.
think my recommendation would be along the lines of what Carla said. The process is for 2 quotes. My recommendation, speaking on behalf of property owners, business owners who are also contractors, I would recommend that that is struck from this matrix and just follow suit with that 2 quotes are provided. Thank you.
Regardless.
So, because I apologize, I don't have the application in front of me. What does it say? How's the definition of the 2 quotes in the application?
It just says 2 quotes must be provided.
So we could change the application. Or no?
To say what?
What everybody's talking about, 2 quotes, and define what a quote is, or we can't do that, or you don't want to do that, or what?
I think the preference is to give additional points versus saying you cannot quote yourself. At least from the city's perspective, we don't want it to be like that's just barred and we won't accept someone that only quotes themselves and one other entity.
Well, let's think about why, and I have to tell you, I am on the side, and I have been for some time because I've seen these grants up close and personal. But originally, it was my thought that, well, if you're the contractor, you're doing the work, and the city's giving you the money, are you not, in fact, being paid twice for getting money for twice? But in fact, in thinking about this, I'm wondering if it's just, if you're the contractor, you're the applicant, you've gotten the money, you're just going to do the work for less because you're doing. So I'm starting to move to the other side in terms of just getting a couple of quotes. That being said, I'm wondering if we can't take that off the matrix in terms of scoring points and simply indicate on the application that something to the effect that preference is given for one of the quotes to be independent, not familial, not because we do have applicants who are the contractor. Their second quote is from the brother-in-law or the grandfather, whatever.
Right.
So that does happen. It's almost applications on a copy machine. You see the same thing over and over every time they apply. And that's, I think, where I was sort of thinking, well, that doesn't seem fair. But in fact, does this particular issue need to be on the scoring matrix and perhaps not just part of the application?
Can I throw something out?
Well,
Yeah, I agree with that.
you know, let's,
Take it out of the scoring matrix and put it into the requirements for the,
I think
right
it's
off the
important to
bat.
have some sort of independence in terms of what we're requiring applicants to do. We're giving them city money. You need to step up and be accountable for something. And this is only one of a couple of issues I have later on in this matrix, but let's have them be accountable to something. You know, maybe they're not scoring points. Maybe by not having it on the scoring matrix, it does even the playing field a little bit, but it's not a give. It's not a give them without some due diligence on their part.
I agree with that.
May I?
Yes, go ahead.
My only concern about just making it a statement in the application as opposed to part of the scoring is how do you give that preference? If you give it to one contractor preference and you don't give it to the other contractor that same preference, how do you make sure it's even across the board and you're not unconsciously biased towards one versus another?
Well, how do you word it then on the application? Do you not say something like an independent, one of your quotes will have to be from an independent contractor?
Non-familiar contractor.
I mean,
Are you
independent.
requiring that? I'm confused.
Well, that's what I'm asking. When you word it on the application, if you're going to take it off the scoring matrix and put it as a requirement on the application,
Yeah.
then boom, done.
So I asked about whether it should just be a requirement.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was
That's the
a preference for it not to be a requirement. I'm just sharing.
I think it should be
That-
stated on the application. In other words, submit two quotes. One must be independent.
So just one has to be independent.
Well,
You're
just
only
one
asking-
independent.
Yeah.
Well,
So if you're the,
Is it really a way for it to be
Quotes. to be
two?
doing it. So if you're a contractor, then you've got to go outside and get the other quote, non-familiar quote estimate.
Regardless, since that contractor is the applicant, for example, they're gonna have to go out to get one other quote because they have to do two.
Yeah.
So you're just saying leave it as it is, essentially.
well, does it say
That's
independent?
what I'm hearing.
What is
Does
the
it say
old,
independent on the application?
what does the old application say?
It doesn't say anything
that's
about
not two
independence
estimates.
because it doesn't have to. If you have to require two, if you're requiring two quotes, even if someone's a contractor and they provide one, they're gonna have to go out to someone else to get that second one. So that's the independent quote that you're asking for.
Exactly right.
So just in total, we don't have to change anything. We just say you have to provide two quotes.
And one of them must be an independent quote.
I
Of the
don't think
two,
it's necessary to say, I don't know,
why wouldn't it be?
because you can only, if you're a contractor, you can only quote it once. You're not gonna quote one and then quote.
No, no.
Keep in mind
If you have two
some have
relations.
multiple companies or LLCs.
Right.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't thinking about that. I was just thinking,
Yeah, it's not just the familial relationship, it's also the business relationship.
all right, sorry,
I think-
that
I think
helped me.
will be okay. I don't think we have any-
But I mean,
And what you're asking for is the right thing. Let me assure you that what you are doing is you are making this business person accountable. Just because they're a contractor, that doesn't mean that they get to give one quote and we're going to take their quote. They can easily quote you high, and that would be the end of it. If it's someone that they have that's one of their own subsidiaries of their company and they want to do that, then that's what you're going to get, as well as a familial. That's what happens. But when you are saying that, what your effort is to try to get an independent quote to go with theirs, just to keep them in the park, because
Right.
unfortunately, there are folks that would take advantage of you. And this is the taxpayers' money, and all of that is correct. And we need to be, in local government, we could stop right now and, if the city wanted to get involved in the city council and require you to do 3, because that's what we have to do. So, we're giving these guys a break by doing 2, but certainly keeping it up on the up and up by doing one independent and along with themselves, but one that doesn't have that connection, whether it's a subsidiary or their own company or familial, that you're getting a truly independent quote.
so what I would say to that effect, leaving this in there, but I would just take out the last one, the 5, and I would put 1, you get 1 if you only do 1 quote. And then if you do the 2 quotes, which you're supposed to do anyway, then you get 3.
Just to have points for that.
Do I?
option.
Yeah, I don't even know that I would.
But that,
If your application requires you to have 2
To
quotes,
whether you should have a
to
possibility to get
address
points.
that, to address the fact that you would get points if you don't have to,
okay, well
goes
that,
against your
then you get
policy.
2 points if you stay within the guidelines.
What's the point of that?
Well,
If you
because
don't stay within the
we have
guidelines, you're
sometimes
ineligible.
we've had sometimes, well, okay, I'll use me as an example. The Arts Council, because we did it. We did the sign out here. I only had 1 quote because I wanted that one person to do the sign, and I only had 1 quote. So if I came before you, then I could get, because I only want 1 quote because I only want that one person to do it, then I can do that, but I'm not doing the guidelines. So one is, I guess, you're not throwing me out, I guess, is what I'm saying.
To
You're not
Melody's
throwing
point-
me out.
To Melody's point, I think she's saying that if you don't meet the requirements, you should become ineligible and your application should just be tossed.
If you already have a policy that states that, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Um,
I just see like.
I can teach you how to do that other quote.
Right. So, and I probably could have gone and got another quote, but I wanted that one person.
We
So.
required 2 already.
We already require 2.
We've already required 2 up front. Okay.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
did.
that's already a
So
requirement.
I'm just,
They
okay,
should
so
be
let's
losing
just
points
leave
if
it.
they're not.
Strike
You're
that
right.
from-
Let's just strike it.
Get off the matrix.
I mean, I'm suggesting strike it. I'm not saying,
Sorry,
I'm
I
not
already
saying
scratched
let
out.
it
Do
strike
you
it.
guys want to vote on that particular at the end? Or do you want
yeah, we'll vote on
Okay.
any changes we've made and whether we want to.
Have
Keep
you actually
pushing.
voted on this, on all of this?
No, we haven't voted on anything yet.
Then,
First time
then
I've
when
seen
you,
it.
when you do vote at the end, all you need to do is vote on it with changes.
With
The
changes.
Agreed, yeah.
Okay. So I guess
So you don't have to worry yourself.
before we move forward, is that okay? Does everybody feel that I'm taking
We're striking it out. Is that what I understand?
it out is
From the
what
scoring.
the chairman is suggesting, striking it out, and I'm asking everyone else how they feel about
I'm okay with that.
That's just called an informal consensus.
that. Is that okay?
That's good.
You're not
Okay.
passing the whole
All right, we can move on.
The last 3, the first one would be historic designation. If you look at the design guidelines in our historic resources packet, there's a map of each of the properties and it has different designations. Pivotal being a very important historic building, contributing meaning it's part of the overall look of the district, fill being just a building built within the last 70 years or so, and then intrusive being not in character with the historic district, and giving priority to those buildings that are most important to allowing us to have the historic district. The next category was applicants that have been awarded funding but were not able to complete the project that they received funding for or didn't complete it on time. That is just based on some past experience, and we just want to make sure that people recognize that moving forward, if they get a grant and they don't follow through on what they said they would, we don't get those monies back. It goes back into a general fund.
Right.
So just having some penalty in the future for future projects they propose.
So if in fact they are awarded money and they do not complete their project, the money that was awarded to them goes back in the general fund, and then they make application the following year. And because they did not meet the requirements of the year before, they are ineligible.
It does not say that they're ineligible. It doesn't give them any points for that. So they didn't meet the requirement or they didn't meet their obligation, they don't get any additional points. If it's
I'll go with
within the
that
last
one.
year.
Okay, but this one seems, okay,
Most
Seems-
questions like this.
it seems like it's
application is
reversed
backwards.
somehow.
It is. Most applications actually give you points for completing. If you did not complete the project, you would get
A 0 or
it
something.
would actually read, has the applicant been awarded funds and completed the proposed work instead of
Okay.
in the past, but not completed. You're going to take the negative out and put
Okay.
it to the positive, and you're going to give them 0 points because they did not complete the project.
Okay.
Or
Right.
you're going to give them a point if they partially completed and so forth.
Right.
It's
It just seemed
actually
backwards,
a
yeah.
little bit twisted back.
So, we're not up first, just so the recording.
Sure.
If you turn back to page 1, we have a question that states, has the applicant previously received facade grant funds? That is the inverse of this question that's of discussion right now, correct?
It is. Well, no,
No,
that's about have they received funds for work. This one's about have they completed a project. So there are actually two different questions.
So I guess do they need to be two separate, or could it?
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
Simply because there are such things. If we were awarded an LWCF grant, then we were awarded the grant and we should get points. But do we complete the project on time?
Okay.
Is the question of that's going to tell us something we need to know.
Okay. I have a question about, if you look on page 2, can we go back to that? My recommendation here is in the scoring matrix. If we could go with 0, does not meet expectation, and then incrementally, slightly, like use those adjectives. I keep going back to this question, this scoring item, and reading number 2, the scoring of 2, and in parentheses.
Which category?
Oh, sorry,
Category.
aesthetic improvements. And then, so catching you guys all back up with me. If you have a project that comes before you and they're asking for a paint, that's their applicant that they're asking for, is that automatically going to go to a scoring of 2? Because there's some really high impact of buildings that are large properties that if the entire property was painted, I could see that being a 5. So I just want to make sure that what's in parentheses doesn't correlate automatically to the project to the score.
It doesn't for me.
Okay.
My thought process is that it does. I mean, regardless of how big your building is, paint is a relatively minor change as compared to a structural, fixing the, I don't know, windows or doors or whatever. I don't know.
Well, I think you still have to evaluate the entire project.
So that's my
There's some level of
recommendation.
discretion for them.
Yeah.
Right.
I would think so.
My recommendation is just to take out the additional text descriptions.
The IE.
And just go with incrementally, slightly improves, markedly improves, considerably, and significantly enhances.
Regardless of what they're using it for.
So just as a person who is trying to figure out what my score would be at the end with a project, how do I figure out where that project falls within this category? Because I could say, well, I think my project is going to be totally transformative of downtown and give it a 5 and then not have an accurate representation of what.
But the scoring comes from
Right. But
mission.
I would test out how well my project's going to score before I bring it to the commission.
Possibly. However, I'm just saying for the commission, the way I'm reading it is that I would foresee that there would be discussion about an applicant's project if they're doing a total exterior paint project, and that's their only project that they're putting forward. And I just wouldn't want it to be limited, that there's a criteria that's objective that then leans back to a 2.
What if you just took out paint and then you have the lighting and the signs? The lighting and the signs is not necessarily, I mean, I don't know that a sign will, I don't know.
We can take it out. It's fine if you want to strike it. Just
because then I think then I would just go to like the scoring of 3 in street furniture. I think I would just like to know objectively how that additional detail gets weighted to the point that it's been tagged to. Because again, someone could put out 1 cafe table in their application. Maybe it's the most expensive street furniture ever, and then that's tied to a 3. I don't know. My recommendation is to take out the additional and keep it the categories.
an exercise that Carla and I went through on the scoring was I threw out paint, lighting, and she threw out a number for what she thought that should, how many points that should earn.
Right.
So if you guys want to hold on to this, go through it yourselves and send in what each of these things you think should score. I don't know if that's.
Yeah, I mean, my thought process was if somebody is painting the facade of the building versus someone who is really modifying the facade of a building with windows, doors, overhangs, awnings, signage, all of that. That's a much more involved project than somebody who's just maybe painting the trim on the front of the building.
But I think where it comes like with Mary is that it's aesthetic. And that's where it comes, because a building can aesthetically be spruced up and look spectacular with just paint.
Okay. Versus there are actually more points in here for cleaning.
Yeah, that was
I was kind of like,
Cleaning is a
kinda
little
put
bit more
that-
difficult on historic buildings though than you think. It's not just
That's probably
pressure
true.
washing.
Right.
And I'm going to say a couple of things. Having written so many grants, here's the kind of stick with that is that one, I agree. I like the simple fact that you listed. We've got slight, we've got moderate, and we've got more than that.
Right.
What is true is that when you're writing a grant, you kind of have an idea when you finish that grant where you stand. And this one is so subjective to, gosh, I think what I just did deserves a 5, and then you guys give it a 4. We haven't given it any help. We haven't given it any criteria to meet a 4 or 5. What's the difference between a 4 or 5? It's your subjective opinion is what it is. And is that a good thing when you're trying to score, if you're going to score a grant?
Right.
Is what you come back.
It's always been subjective. We've just never been held to a standard.
That's true. I mean, you can do this either way. I'm just pointing out both sides to when you're writing grants versus the person who's getting ready to score that grant. And the person, I'm going to know whether or not I have a strong grant before I submit it. And most people kind of who write grants want to kind of know.
Is it because you know the criteria that you have to meet?
That is correct.
Yeah.
It is more specific. I know that I've met this, and this. And
Right.
this grant process tells me that if I haven't met those things, then I am not going to be ranked a very high.
Project up to that standard, so
That is correct.
I think
you have
that's
a
what this-
standard to do.
I think that's what this process is really trying to provide clarity to the applicant to say, does your project meet these categories?
These
Are
standards.
they doing that or not? And then say, oh, I don't.
So I think I do not disagree with what you're saying, Councilwoman Wiggins, is that in this is building an objective component. It's making it more transparent and streamlined of the process. So where this lives with the application that we've mentioned is there should be some language of bullet points that could hit at these are directions. Like
Absolutely correct, ma'am.
without having to go to this,
Absolutely correct.
I think that might get us where we want to be
It
without
is.
getting so particular on each criteria.
It could be, and what Barry's suggesting is that it goes into your instructions
Yes.
of filling out your application. And part of the instruction does list some bullet points of this could be what this could mean.
Hmm.
And it gives them an opportunity to say, gosh, if I painted the door, but if I painted the whole building, you're giving them some examples. And I think what you're doing is the correct thing. I think that if we take it off of this and put it in that instruction, then you're going to get what you want.
are we redesigning the application? Please?
No. Say that again.
Are we
Rewriting the application.
rewriting the application in itself?
Chicken.
No,
But is that what you're saying? Is that goes on the application? Is that what
No.
you're
Well,
saying?
it's part
No,
of
no.
the
There should be-
instructional.
when doing a grant, actually, I know that you're trying to make this simple, and you want to keep it simple, but what helps make it simple is really good criteria and instruction.
Mm-hmm.
And there should be, you've got the right idea. This is, see, I don't have what this exactly is. what is this termed as being, what we're reviewing?
The criteria matrix.
To help fill out the application?
No,
It's
for-
No.
For the project
so
so that
this
they
is-
can take 10 and whittle it down to
Okay,
2.
great. So
Right.
this is the scoring mechanism. Okay, great.
I assume this was for us to use.
That is correct.
Right.
So this would be the scoring mechanism. What we're talking about, what Mary brought up is absolutely true. There would be instructions to the application that may just be one single sheet
right.
that describes the application and how to fill out the application. So I'm not talking about changing the app. I'm talking about including an instruction.
Including
sheet. Does
instructions.
that make sense?
Mhm.
And that way you're able to get them. And that's for y'all to decide. I'm
Thank you, Madam Advisor.
just trying to give you a grant process view is all I'm trying to do of what I think people are going to expect from you and how you can guide them to give you what you want.
Right.
So in fact, on our scoring matrix, we can take out the parentheses,
Yeah. You can
And- but-
simply,
transfer that information to the instruction sheet.
Yeah.
So that when they bring their application before us
it gives
we-
them some criteria,
some-
it gives you.
and
some
helps us
criteria.
score. But do we need the IEs? Do we need the examples ourselves? I don't think we do. Do you guys?
I don't think you need it here.
Right.
I think you'll have the instruction sheet just like they have. And if you put all those instructions here, then you've simplified this rather than for you guys to sit up here and argue that this one may be more important than the other. Then you've got an instruction sheet that says, it's the level, it's truly comes down to the level of what they've done, is it not? That's the bottom line for you guys, right? Is it a high level? Is it not? And you can give them some examples, but you're not making it inclusive by not putting it on this. This doesn't bind you, but it gives you
Some flexibility.
some flexibility, but it gives them some criteria to shoot for.
Right.
Okay. You can in that instruction sheet. Oh gosh, you can list 6 or 8 or 10 things. Well, you can give them bullets. You can give them bullets in that instruction thing, and say the painting of a door or the painting of the total building, or that gives them some criteria and gives you some criteria. It helps you be able to justify exactly what you're doing too.
Also keep in mind that the applicants come before us to defend their application
That's right.
in order to receive the award. So going into that whole grant process, we get to see the scoring matrix, plus we're familiar with the instructions, plus we hear from the applicant. That's kind of how grants work. So
Well, it's
I
going to
love
be
it.
for you. Plus, they're going to see if they have everything that you do, and they know how it's being scored. They're going to do that. Now, but that's clear to both sides of what expectations are.
Or do you think we're at some point going to have to revisit how we go about using the total to figure out how we narrow down to the top? But
Right.
that's
I was just going to
discussion for
say,
another day, I
what is
think.
that process?
Yeah.
Like if you get 6 projects that score the same thing.
No, I just mean there's going to be 6 people with different scores potentially. They may not all say that they get the aesthetic, they get 5 points for that. Somebody might say, oh, that's only worth 3 points to me. I don't know.
Yeah, that's for you. Are you talking about for the examples?
Well,
No.
the scoring process, so right now, the applicants present, you guys are like under the gun in front of them to approve. So it's almost like you need to receive a presentation, then it's the next month's meeting after they've been,
I don't think we can do that.
can't wait a month.
I think it needs to be
You
that
can't change your
awarded.
deadlines to get
I
presentations.
was sitting here thinking, it would be nice if we did have,
I'm in between.
say, a month between meetings or even a called meeting, 2 weeks from the date, that the person presents the project, and then we have time to individually look at all the instructions, and then have those in hand when you take the call meeting.
And then at that time, say across the board, I don't know how the points line up. Let's just use 25 as the top. But like it was a 25, a 10, a 15, a 17, a 25. Take all those numbers and you average it, and that's what that project was scored. And then that's how you look to see who are the top three.
That's, I mean, so how we do grants, it's a ratio. So you score it out and then you divide it by,
4 people, and then that's
right, and then that's the amount, and it comes down. So whoops, and so then you have the people. But we do it a little different, because after we talk to the person, then we say how much we think we want to give them, and that's in there already by project. And then it gets to the end, and then we know how much we've granted out, and then we have to go back if there's, which we usually have to do, we have to cut it more, but at least there's a bottom line of what we expect on each project. Now, I don't know that we can do that here necessarily, but that's how we do it.
going, I guess, back to the recommend or the suggestion about having it over multiple days. I'm concerned on a couple of fronts there. The first being that we want to give the applicant as much time as possible to complete the project. So I understand what you're saying, have a called meeting afterwards, but then are you requiring the applicant to be at both meetings? And
No, they would have made their presentation at the time that we scored the matrix. The called meeting, as I understand it, tell me, Helen, if I'm getting this wrong, we simply discuss our findings, and we take our scores and work out exactly what Mary was saying. Well, you may like this more, and we may like, well, then we come to a consensus.
So like if we had a score sheet, so we listen to them and then everybody scores it, and then they hand it to you,
Debbie.
sorry, but then you have an Excel sheet that you put it in. Then at the end, we get that score sheet back, and it says, it ranks them down to who, like if 2 of them are high and 4 of them are low or whatever, it ranks them basically. Then we can take that with monies and decide from that the monies, meaning that the people that are ranked high will get more of their money for their project than the people that are ranked lower.
Are we obligated to give money to every applicant?
no,
I didn't think
You
so.
don't
Are we obligated to automatically give them 50% of
No.
no.
No, but you can't do more.
Can't do more
No,
than
no.
50.
But I didn't know if it had to
But
be
anyway,
50%.
I don't know that will work.
I think it'd be
That's similar to what we do with leaving out us saying, or, okay, I could even do it a little different. On the score sheet, each of us could put down how much. I don't know, probably won't work. I was going to say we could put down how much we thought that project would get, but that wouldn't work. Never mind.
I liked your first idea with the average score based on all of yours divided by 5 people,
Right.
giving that a score and then ranking it from top to
Right.
bottom in terms of priority.
Right.
We do that all in one shot.
My recommendation would be to do it all in one meeting, because regardless of whether it's a called meeting or not, it's a public forum, so people will be able to come. And I don't necessarily think it's a good practice to have them want to come twice for the same.
And we can't go into closed session to decide. that,
No, that's
No, and what it would require you to do is, if you're able to work this so that you're given at least 2 weeks to review the materials and rank them yourselves, then all you're doing by their presentations is just tweaking your your
Yeah,
score.
score.
Because you'll have all this
You've got
material
all
in a
the
packet.
Yeah.
material. You're gonna be
So you
able
can
to
come
rank
with
it.
your own score.
Right.
And that's
And-
what we require them to do. We
Right.
give them all that stuff and then they have to come, but they change their score and a lot of them do change after they listen
After
to
they
what
see
the
the
president.
presentation.
Right.
Absolutely. And that gives you the opportunity. But if you've already gone through the materials, if you feel like this is going to be a great project, they've given you everything you need on paper, but
So-
when they stand up here, you realize they don't have it together, then that's where you
That can
get,
affect
That's
your,
when then
or
you change
it, you know, this kind of, you're not sure. Right now, I'm going to tell you, if this doesn't look good, and then they come up here and they're a little sketchy up there, that's
Yeah.
not a
Done.
good sign.
that just
You know,
clarifies.
if you've got one high, they're gonna wean themselves out. It's gonna show up. But if you come prepared, what your idea is, you listen openly, change anything you have, come down here, rank out your projects. You guys get to do it, and then if that's done quickly enough in this meeting, you're given the rankings. You guys just write it down, and then you determine as a consensus as a group how much money you're going to give them. And you may have in mind what you have if you think you're going to have 3 or 4 or 5. Now that's,
Yeah, I would say to come with the amount that you think that that project would make, and then that will be easier when we're talking about it, that you already have in your mind, oh, I think that project's $1,000. So then if 3 people say, I think that $1,000 is the same, then it's easier to
To make a decision.
make a
it gives you the opportunity, if you have one person who continually comes back to the table asking for money, and it gives you an opportunity to say to what I call the little guys, the small business owner, who's come to you one time and really needs this amount of funding. It gives you that opportunity to say, I might rank that higher than I would rank, or I would be willing to give 50% on this one. But the person who comes year after year after year, who's got the person in-house to be able to do that.
Right.
It's like Mecklenburg writing the grants. They can write them much faster than I can.
Right.
But you have to pay attention, so you don't reward them every single time.
Right.
Or you might reward them, but it might be a
Smaller amount. Yeah.
Do we know what we've got to give yet? Have we been,
I'm sorry?
do we know what amount of money we've
Usually.
got to
Yeah.
give
It was
yet?
15,000.
15.
15,
Yeah.
okay, so
And
it's always,
budget's 15,000.
It was consistent. We asked for more. We'll continue. Just
We appreciate
Just for clarification, because I came in right as the grants were wrapping up, if I'm asked by a property owner or a business owner, what's the lead time that they will receive the applications?
So we're trying to make this process so that they get at least a month to 2 months before the application is due. 2 months primarily because if there's a COA that they have to approve, we don't want to do COAs on the same night that they're trying to get facade grants, because that just adds length to that meeting. So if possible, if we can get them to apply for the COA a month in advance of when the facade grants are going to go be awarded, that would be tremendously help, I think, this process.
Right.
And then do you know the lead time from 2018 when the applications were due and then when they were sent out to the commission members?
So commission members received it 2 weeks in advance of the meeting.
Would it be, could we use a little more time than, since we're going to be doing this a bit independently, would it be helpful if we had a 3-week lead, if you set the deadline for 3 weeks so we all have a
well, I
chance to?
think the more time the better, but it depends on how many apps we get too. So,
I will just say that I did not receive 95% of the applications until the day of the
day of.
deadline.
Okay, let's talk about that deadline.
Right, so the deadline is a requirement. Meet the deadline, meet all the conditions of the requirements. And so I think what I'm asking is, and what I'm hearing, can that deadline be 3 weeks as a lead time to the night of the presentations?
I'm just hesitant to change dates because some people have it in their heads that the May 9th or whatever the date is in the application is the day of it forever and ever until the end of the earth. But
Well,
That could just be-
well, you know what? Let's think about that.
What do you
Well,
mean, May?
I don't think it's May, it's October something.
Right.
Yeah, it's
October.
October. Yeah.
I just threw out.
But
I think May is when they have to, the projects have
that's
to be
May
completed
1st,
by.
yeah.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
We may need to rethink that. I mean, it's great that they may have this carved in granite in their brain, but on the other hand, you're asking this commission to use a different system than we're used to.
We have a new member coming on board.
And we have, yes, exactly right.
I think I also heard there may be opportunities for you to do site visits if you had a little more time.
We can do that, yes.
So I'm not opposed. It is completely up to this commission. We just need to make sure that we communicate all of these changes, including a new date for an application deadline, when we get a final approval on.
And I would be
this.
happy to communicate that. Does it need to go before council for approval of the dates, or is that the staff level? Okay.
And what you can do is, I'm hearing what you're doing, to keep your current application without any major changes except for a date. You don't need to vote on you do need to vote on this as a whole by itself with the corrections that you're making. The date you would need to vote on at the end will be the correct dates that you want put in there. So technically you're only going to have 2 votes when we finish this. So just to keep that easy for you.
Do we have another front end, do we already have the date of when the applications would open?
I'll look it up.
And does that have to be voted upon? Because going back to that information sheet,
Yes.
these are nuggets that would be great to be on that.
Their timelines need to be
Busy.
changed. And the only thing I would recommend, Alexa, is that the city council be made aware of changes in dates.
Okay.
As information to us. But this board needs to make a decision of what is in the best interest for you to make the best decision.
Right. So we've gone over this. Is there any other questions on it? The only thing I see is that I see that we changed we removed the contractor vendor quotes, and then we were going to remove the parentheses.
Is
that correct?
Yeah.
That's the parentheses or the paint in the second one?
Well, that's what I meant.
That's
What
the
was
stuff in the
just
parentheses.
what's in parentheses we were going to remove.
All of it.
That'll be put in the instruction sheet.
And
Anything else that anyone saw?
Instruction sheet,
I'm
so you
sorry.
wouldn't need to vote on that.
I'm sorry.
An instruction sheet is just an instruction sheet, so you would not need to vote on that.
But if I could get anyone
So
wants
that
to
would be
help draft
removed.
that, I'd be more than welcome.
That's
You're welcome.
that's
Instruction
part of
sheet.
that.
I thought so, but
I
wanted
can
to
help
be
you
sure.
with that.
Right.
This entire thing.
Except
And may I ask, who enforces the applications when they're submitted to the city? When
Enforces
the
whether they met the deadline and have the criteria that's required.
And when they apply, when they submit their applications, if it's by 5 p.m. on September 1st, let's just say, and
Yeah.
they come in on September the 2nd at 9 a.m. and they say, well, sorry.
I
How is
stamp
that
it.
handled?
I stamp it as the date and I put the time on it. And I've been hesitant to just toss it into the back of the file and say, I'm not giving it to you in your packet, because in the past that has not worked out so well. Because it's been, oh, staff is prohibiting me from doing that, from submitting an application, but
No, staff's upholding the rules.
I can just put it in. I mean, as long as you guys say this was turned in late, I'm not gonna
I don't
review
think,
it.
is that for us to do? I mean, are we meant?
Yes, I don't feel comfortable saying I'm not gonna include it in that packet, because I feel like it's staff telling them no, and I shouldn't have that authority.
But that would be a different.
What you do is you stick it at the bottom and not give them any points because they were late, and then you get on with it.
Okay. Well, I mean,
direct-
that's fine by me. I'm just
You want to
wondering
do
where
that? Just stick it on here.
I mean, if she dates it for you, she'll give you all of her material, which is her job to do. She'll give you everything, and it's your job to assess that it was late.
And if
And
it's
so then you
stamped
just don't give it
with the
any,
date,
Don't give it any.
we automatically
If it's
know.
if it's past the deadline, you're making the rules. So
but there has to be
there's a
some.
deadline. So if there's a deadline and you want to stick to the deadline, that's all you do is you rank it low, or you determine you're not going to rank it because it comes in past the deadline. You're a 5, 6, 1, 2,
Well, why not
5, 6, 7 people.
in the instructions where we ask for 2 quotes, say it will absolutely not be accepted past the deadline?
Will not be
Because then it's a
considered.
determination by staff
And
that
it'll be
I'm not
considered.
providing information to this commission that they've submitted something.
The wording
But
has to be,
any
will not be
company I've ever
considered.
worked for, if this is the date and the deadline, they have said, we're sorry, it's not accepted. I mean, I've just been told it's not accepted. It is past time. These are adults, they're business owners. Can they not understand that?
So as government, I think it's a little bit different because we're trying to provide public service, and I'm struggling with that.
so I guess so my concern is that then they're here and then we have to listen to them, so it's wasting our time.
I agree.
It should be sorted before it
that's-
even gets to this.
So that they don't come before us.
I think you're going to hear from them one way or the
I
other.
shouldn't say waste our time, but it is sort of, because we're not going to vote on it if they're,
I think, Alexa, to assist you.
Yeah.
I think this group needs to give her permission
okay.
to send a notice to an applicant or the person that comes in face to face the day after, or anything past the deadline. You need to give her permission to let them know that their application is late and it will not be considered.
Okay.
So you just need to give her the authority to do her job. Okay.
So we'll
That way, it doesn't look like one staff member in the city is against me.
Right.
This is policy, and this board is sticking to their policy.
Right.
And it's made known.
Okay.
That way, they're not going to come to the meeting.
Okay, I understand where y'all are coming from too. I just
Yeah,
trying to,
I agree. I understand.
You're on the
that.
firing line.
I've been there.
regardless,
If
yeah.
it's stated clearly up front, this is the date, this is 5 o'clock's the deadline, and they come in at 9 o'clock the next morning, it was clearly
And-
stated. this
And they
is the
will.
date, and this
I'm
is
just
the
telling
time.
you now,
But
they
they're
will, and they
always
have.
going to. They're always going to. But
Unless you,
like I said, I've
Well,
always
they
been
won't,
told,
they won't
sorry.
the next year.
We can
They might the first year, but they won't the next year.
You're exactly right, sir.
So let me
okay.
understand, if we give Alexa permission, and how do we do that? Do we all
So
just say?
we'll have to vote on it, but let's do this one first and
Well,
then we
but
can
my,
go.
que-
up there.
we can, but
Yeah.
my question, so we give you permission and then somebody misses the deadline, you go ahead and take it and then you send them the letter saying, I'm sorry,
You don't
or do you,
take it.
I would say you don't take it.
Don't take it.
doesn't take it? Well, I thought I heard Melody said.
What if they
says-
dropped it off at Debbie's desk?
Right, well, then you're gonna
So-
have to send a letter.
So
yeah.
you act
And
accordingly.
Debbie has to tell them, no.
What's going to happen?
Well, I think as long
The
as it's,
application needs to be cleared, that it needs to be in Alexa's hands, or it needs to be in her office by that period of time.
Right.
It does not mean you hand it to the mayor
Right,
to deliver to you, or Melody Wiggins to deliver it,
right.
is not going to cut it.
You want to keep it consistent for all.
Right.
Absolutely.
There shouldn't be anybody else involved, anybody else's
Right.
hands. It should go from one to the other.
I agree.
From applicant to Alexa.
So let's go back to this. Is there any other discussion on the matrix or changes?
Oh, did you look at it?
Just to be clear on this last one about the funds haven't been awarded in the past.
Oh, right, and we are gonna switch that around. Because that was backwards, right? We're gonna reword it. So that has to be reworded. So, thank you. I forgot.
Yeah,
to
because
mention
I
that.
was looking at it and I made some notes, but I was like, wait a minute,
We're gonna say and completed in the past and completed the proposed work.
they have not completed. They
But we're
get,
gonna turn the matrix around. the
Right,
0 to
exactly. If
5.
you haven't
Okay.
completed, it's a 1 or a 0, but if you have completed, it's a 5.
right.
It's switched around. And we will ask the staff to reword that.
3 weeks.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other?
Mhm.
Okay, so can I have a motion? And you'll have to add into your motion the different changes that we make. Okay, that's right, with changes, sorry. Thank you. Is that a motion?
Yes, as a matter of fact, yes, I'd like to make a motion that the scoring matrix criteria for the facade grant applications be accepted with changes.
Is there a second?
Second.
May I have the motion restated, please, by the staff so we know that.
So the motion made by Elaine Murin and seconded by Carla Smith was to accept the facade grant criteria matrix with changes that were stated earlier, just previous to this motion. And that was the motion.
Okay, thank you. So any discussion on that?
Yes, I still have questions about the one we just turned around. Because we're now giving 5 points to someone who,
The staff is going to correct all that, and we'll see it. Correct it. So that you're giving 5 points to the person that has completed the project, and you're giving no or 1 points to the ones that haven't completed or
but
semi-completed.
if you, instead of 0 to 5, it's 5 to 0, you're,
No, it's still 0 to 5. It's just that the 0 means they didn't complete the project.
We're switching the wording to make it
Yeah, not the
Yeah.
numbers.
not
but
the
just
numbers,
Not the
the
numbers,
wording. I'm
okay,
sorry,
all right.
switching. That makes sense.
yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I misunderstood it. so.
Okay.
All right.
Anything else? So all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
All opposed? It passes. Thank you. Okay, now we had also on the floor discussion about the requesting staff to not accept applications after the deadline. And those applications would not become before us if they don't meet the deadline. Any
You asking
discussion?
for a motion at this time?
I am asking for a motion on that.
I would like to make a motion that we give permission to city staff to reject any applications that are submitted after the deadline, rendering them applicable.
Can you also put in that they will not become
Oh,
before us?
and they will, and as a result, will not come before the commission for consideration.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion about the motion? Okay, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, the motion passes. Thank you. All right.
Who was the second?
I was.
Jeanette. All right. We'll go back to the agenda, and we have the architectural inventory staff.
So we the day after our last meeting, staff went on a walk about with the NC SHPO staff and tried to get them to give us a cost estimate for the architectural inventory. I thought I would have that information by now. I do not. I reached out again today just to get additional feedback and where that is in their process. She did share that they had a record number of people or communities that are looking at architectural inventories. I think she said there's 2 staff members that do it and 34 communities in the last
Oh, gosh.
year. So it's been a little bit longer of a process than is normal. So I'm hoping to get that by the next meeting.
May I stop you one moment and kind of redirect you backward for a moment? You're changing the dates on your
Oh,
application. And
Okay.
Right.
Sorry.
Thank you.
vote on those.
Thanks.
thank you.
Okay, we'll rewind back. And Alexa, did you find the dates?
Yeah, the date for 3 weeks ahead of HRC meeting would be for the October timeframe, would be September 16th that they would be due.
Okay.
And then that would give them October 8th would be the presentation date and the date that you guys put the scoring and then award funds.
Would you say the
Okay.
16th of September?
Yeah, September 16th would be the due date. October 8th would be the presentation and awarding funds.
Okay, so I do have another question on that one. Is you were saying that if they had a COA, that would need to come in the September meeting for
It
the
would need to be the
COA?
September meeting, which is not the 16th. September 16th is just the due date.
Right, but it would be in that September. So is that on the application that they would have to, if they have a COA, that has to be in by September, or they're not eligible for?
That is
Grant.
currently not a requirement. They could apply for the COA as it's currently written during the month that they're being awarded funds. You can make a recommendation to change that if you would like to do so.
I would like to. It speeds up the process and allows us to
Better decision.
make a better decision, right?
I will say that requires them to have some foresight and thinking 2 months ahead of
Right.
due date. Just throwing that out there as
So when does this application go out? Like, when can they see the application and know about that they're applying for the grant?
I'm going to attempt, now that we have this in place, at least 2 months ahead of where this, and I guess it needs to be a little bit further than 2 months if they have to do the
Right.
COA.
So
and this.
September,
So 3 months,
Talking,
August.
July.
mid-July
July.
sometime.
I think that would be good.
So we open the applications in July? Is that what we're
I think that would be good.
That's a recommendation.
does that have to be voted on?
So are you saying that you would like to make the requirement?
Yeah,
that
do
they
we have to
have
vote on
COAs?
that so that it's
If
on
that's
there?
a change.
Okay. So,
So we open the applications on July 1?
well, I don't know, is that plausible for the staff to do that?
Yeah, I mean, we have the application and this in place now. The only piece we're missing is the extra page, if you want.
So,
Yeah.
We are talking about changing the application that would have the instructions, but the due date would be changed to, well, the application would open on July 1 and the due date would be September 15th,
16th.
16th.
But do want clarification on the COA, so.
And that the COA,
I think
that
those are
if
two
there
separate
is a C,
motions.
right,
You're-
okay, separate motion.
Yeah.
Okay. Do I have a motion concerning the COA. Let's do that first, I think, and then dates.
The motion.
So that the motion, so the discussion would be that the COA, if the applicant has a COA, part of their grant application, that would, the COA has to be approved by the September meeting. Is that correct?
Can you make that a requirement? No, I know it's a requirement to have a COA, but can you make it a requirement that they do it a month in advance when there's still an opportunity to have a I don't know.
Yeah, I struggle with the notion. Is there a reason why we have to have the COA at the same time as the grant app?
Because you can't, because in order to give them grant money, you have to first approve the COA.
COA. But we have not done that in the past, have we?
This last year we did, because the year before we got all messed up. It really, you have to do.
Okay, well.
It was a,
Award
it
the
was a big
money
If
for
they
something
don't.
that's not appropriate.
Right.
It's not approved. Require it. You don't have to say that it has to come in September. They may be ready to roll now and they.
Well, that's why I was saying it has to be
has to
by
be approved
September,
by September.
approved
I think
by September.
if you've already made a precedent of that you want the COA approved, if it is indeed part of the grant itself, the grant request, because all you're doing is making sure that they're actually going to get it done. If not, then you would be approving it pending the outcome of the COA.
Well, what I'm asking is they still have an opportunity at that meeting where they're doing the grant process for COA, because anyone can apply for a COA that month.
Yeah, that's true.
And so is that creating, I don't know the right word there is.
Should we not have a COA perhaps the month prior to the September 16th
Well, that's,
hearing?
that's what we're, that's
Well,
what
that's
Oh,
what
I'm
I'm
sorry.
talking about, yeah.
Okay.
So the reason being is, like we did last time, we went through all of the applicants first that had COAs, and they had to come before us, and then we approved it. And then the applicants that didn't have a COA, then they came before us during the grant period, but we didn't ask the ones that we'd already seen. So it's kind of, I think the flow of the night would be better if we are just listening to the applicants and the COA is already approved.
I'm just concerned about the due process of denying them the opportunity, since if they were just coming in for a COA, they would be able to have their case be heard regardless.
Okay, but okay, so we could have that. So is it due process if we say they can have a COA that night, but they're not part of the granting process? Can we do that?
No, I wouldn't do that.
You can't do that.
I think that you probably can get by with doing it the month before, however, or by the month prior to September. I think you probably can. But what I would want to do is get Bob's.
I think we should get some legal opinions.
Okay.
Beyond my, I think.
So do we need to make a motion to ask the staff to do that, or we just say ask the staff to look into it?
Ask the staff to look into it, and at your next meeting, you can actually make that. Well, that's going to prolong.
Opening the application.
Can we not just say they have to have their COA by September 1st? That's 2 weeks before the
Well, but
grants.
they're saying that due process, we might be stepping on ourselves in the due process that we're required to do.
Can I just throw maybe a monkey question? Is it possible that somebody comes before us with a good-looking grant application, but their COA is not acceptable? Is that possible?
If their COA was not approved, then no.
Well, and so with that answer, then that would suggest that we
So,
do them in two different.
I'll explain what happened last time is you're in the middle of trying to give the grant money. So what we were doing is we were accepting them for the grant money. We
But
didn't accept them for the COA. So if they didn't get money and they came before us, we didn't count that as we didn't say you're granted a COA. We said you don't get any money. So it really messed them up because we didn't do the process that we were supposed to go through and say, you get the COA. So what it would mean is that night we would, it's two processes. And it really is better to go through the process and make sure they have the COA before we're granting them money.
So,
Not going to
so
approve it.
let's err on this side. Let's err that you require that right now. You're welcome to make that in a motion and require that right now. Alexa, tomorrow you simply take it to Bob and say, this is what we've asked. Do you see anything wrong with that? If there were to be something wrong, Bob will send an email that Alexa will send to all of you. That point will be null and she will let you know that you have to do it in September rather than to do it vice versa. Do you understand?
Right.
If you did not include it, but that's what you wanted and you waited to get an answer from Bob, then you're going to be too late.
Right.
Now all he's got to do is say, oh, you guys can't do that. And we can have an answer in a short period of time. The other would cause you to have to meet again to make that decision. Yeah. So I would err and ask permission.
Okay.
If you're going to do that. I would step forward and go ahead and make what you would like to have done, and then let Alexa take that to Bob and get you a firm answer. She'll get you an answer and then inform all of you that
Either way.
It's
Okay,
go or
that's
it's a
good.
no-go.
Yeah.
And then,
That way you don't have to come back. And if it's true that you get to keep it, then you're already ahead of the game.
then how do we let the applicants know this?
They'll be on the application.
That they must submit a COA with their application?
Not with their application, because at that point it'd be too late.
Right.
I'm
The-
sorry.
the
ahead of-
COA
Yeah.
For the grant
Must be on
purpose,
file at the time of
Pre-approved,
your
yeah.
application is submitted.
but has to been
Has to have been
approved.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
approved
Oh,
COA.
I see,
Approved.
Okay, okay.
So
I'm with
there's
you.
no charge for a COA. I mean, they can, it's not like a building permit or something where you got to pay for it. Okay. So they can come do that even if they decide not to put the application for money in, they can
Yes.
still, they can do their COA and not have to
So I
necessarily
was-
do the work. Okay.
I was just texting with Nathan to get his interpretation. He said, and I asked whether they could require 1 month prior to awarding facade grant. He said, no, but they can require that facade grants aren't approved for items that require a major COA, which haven't been approved prior to the application.
So it's just a reverse.
So basically what we did last year,
Right.
you know, if they didn't get a COA or it wasn't approved that meeting, that they wouldn't be eligible, but so I don't think he's saying that we can require them, but we can go through that process and ask.
You're saying Nathan doesn't think we can require them, that they can go through September and get the COA in
Right, and
September.
required in September.
Why do you suppose
But
he
once
says
again,
that?
what if they,
But if we say that at the COA has to have been approved in order to apply for the grant.
Okay, we can go whichever direction you want, and we'll go through Bob and get a,
So
Probably wait.
I think it should say the COA
Tell Nathan we don't like his answer.
has to have a prior approval in order to apply, in order to be eligible for the
Why are we
grant.
wasting our time and our money for a project that's not going to be approved to be done?
Right,
That
so-
means,
Keep in mind that this particular change I could see this actually coming back to us at the July meeting. But if it did, it would, we have enough time now that it would come back to the council in July.
Right.
So,
So can I make, so I'm going to make the motion that, now I forgot how to say it. The COA has to have prior approval. Let's see, how did I say that? Darn it.
Approved prior to application being submitted.
The COA to be eligible in, let's see, for the grant has to have a prior approval.
Oops, sorry.
Okay, the COA has to have prior approval in order to be eligible for a grant. Work. Has to have prior approval in order to be eligible for the grant.
And that's major or minor.
Yeah, I can approve a minor.
Right, but it has to be submitted prior to
Well, the COA has to be approved, right? So,
COA covers everything, yeah.
And if it doesn't require a COA, meaning it's a project that's like replacing storefront glass or something that doesn't require it, then it,
Then
Right.
it's a moot point.
Yeah.
Then
okay. So Carrie Worthy's motion was to require prior approval of a COA in order to be eligible for a facade grant. Does that encompass what you're talking about with it being,
right, because,
but it has to be the month prior? Is that, I'm just
well,
saying it's
in
part of
order
it.
to be eligible for a grant, and the grant is due by September 15th, so the COA has to be approved before September 15th.
So you're asking for me
Is
to
that-
create discretion in terms of kicking out things that don't meet the requirements then? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. Well, this needs to be on the grant, on the application, so that people know that that the COA has to be, they have to have the COA before they can apply for a grant.
So if they submit, I'm just going to give a hypothetical. If they submit something and it's a COA that hasn't been approved yet, and they're giving it to you to review, if it hasn't been reviewed yet, I have to say this project is not eligible.
Not complete.
It's not eligible for the grant,
for this grant cycle.
for this grant cycle.
If it's COA appropriate, it has to have that
yeah,
approval.
yeah.
It needs to be approved before we look at
This-
it.
Yeah, this project requires a COA.
That's why you need.
If we're doing it in January, I mean, July, August, September, they have 2 months, 2.5, well, 3 months really, to get in here and get their COA.
I'm just really nervous about that, but no, I'm nervous because it's going to fall on me to say I'm not giving you the information that's being submitted.
Okay, so what I would say to them is that we can see the COA to apply for it, I mean, to accept it, but that COA will not be included in the grant process. So it's not,
Okay. So
does
they
that
can
make
submit it,
sense?
but it won't be eligible during that same day.
During this grant cycle. Now, they could apply for the grant next year, perhaps.
Do you see what I'm saying?
This,
Oh, you're saying, so, okay, yes. If it has to come in October because something happened, like, because of how they do things, then yes, we could see that COA, but it would not be part of the grant cycle. They could not apply for monies in the
Yeah.
grant cycle.
Let me make just a point, because I totally agree with what you're trying to do. What concerns me, and I think is what's maybe concerning Alexa, is this is mid-June. And because of the timing, to make a change that significant and only give a business owner, you're assuming that they know it after we finish this meeting tonight. They're not going to know it, which means that they are going to be limited in their period of time this time if they have to go through a COA. It's a whole new process that you're taking them through. We're not really giving them enough time to educate them.
Okay.
Doing a new process.
All right. So can we, I get what you're saying, and I understand that. So can we put on the application that in the future grant applications, which would be next year or next year's grant applications, all COAs will have to be approved before the deadline of the grant cycle in order to apply for the grant. Can we do that?
My only recommendation was,
So that educates them?
I'm not sure how much of the application all of them read. So,
Well, I mean, that's one way. We're going to have to do more than one thing, but that would be one way to get the word out, and then we're going to have to get the word out
Put
in
it on
other
the
ways.
application for this year.
Right.
Anybody who's done a grant will know that it's on the application, and you're given that period of time to educate them to do that. The next thing is the responsibility of these adults to apply for something, and you've given them plenty of time to go through and get a COA prior to the next grant.
Right.
You can say effective January 1, 2020 or something like that.
could we
State the new process.
hold off on it and say we'll get the legal opinion
Oh,
on
right.
whether that's available, and then at the next meeting make that determination as to what can and can't be? I don't want to put it out there and then have to go back and
Sure. I get it.
re-educate.
All right. So let's table this discussion until the staff receives legal counsel on this, and we will discuss it for the next, not the current grant cycle, but the future grant cycle.
So now you can go ahead and set your dates.
But my concern is, okay, we've given, we'll say Mary, we've given Mary money, but her COA is not approved, so she is not allowed to do that work. So
Well,
she
no.
doesn't get that money.
Now, what we have to do is what we did this last year is if they have a COA, they'll have to come before us first,
Yeah,
the same night,
uh-huh.
and then we'll approve it or we don't. And if we don't approve it, then they're out of the grant cycle.
Because they didn't have a COA.
Right.
But, okay, my concern was, okay, they didn't get approved. The money doesn't go to them.
Right. But
Did
so
you
they're
not
not.
say the money goes back into the, not
No,
at that
no,
stage?
no.
You have other applicants you can. That's
So
the whole
so that night we will pull their sheet and they won't be counted in the matrix. So we won't even.
So
we
they're
won't even
basically-
look at them.
Like they're wasting their time turning it in late. They're wasting their time handing us something without the COA being approved.
They don't know if it's approved yet. You can't.
Yeah,
approve
well,
it
they're
that night.
necessarily wasting their time if they didn't do it and there's not a good COA, yes. But we do have to approve this COA. We have to allow them to go through that process. If we don't approve it, then they applied for the grant, then they're just out of the grant cycle. They don't get that. We are not going to look at it as money.
Yeah, I just
Can't have them on the but it'll all be done in one, like that night where we are trying to get them to do
So
it
either
earlier.
Nathan and Alexa will approve it as a minor, or we'll sit up here and debate it like
That's
a
correct.
major, which we're going to have to do anyway as a major.
Right, that's correct.
I know. I'm just trying to get.
Okay, so.
I just don't want money going back to
No, it won't.
Money's
the
not going.
slush fund or the city council or something that we could have spent. I mean, you know, we could have
If I'm sitting down.
handed out.
Yeah, so, let's go ahead and
$500
change the
left.
date. So can I have a motion to change the date to July 1 as when the application goes out, and September 16th as the date that the application is due.
Is
I
that the
guess.
motion?
I guess I'll make the motion. I don't know.
Yes, yes.
I made the motion that on the application, if we will have the opening date of the application will be July 1, 2019, and the closing date will be September 16th, 2019, at 5 p.m. in the hands only of the staff, Alexa Powell.
All right.
I
so
second it.
Strong and hearty.
that the motion by Carrie Worthy was to have the application for the facade grant open in July 1st and the due date being September 16th, 2019 at 5 o'clock to this HRC staff liaison. And
Alexa.
the presentation would be on October 8th for that
That's correct.
awarding of funds.
So is there any discussion on that?
No.
Do I have a motion? I mean, do I have a,
Vote
I
all
already
in
seconded
favor,
it.
aye.
all in favor, aye. I'm sorry. Well, approved. It's approved. I'm
Aye.
sorry, I lost track of what I was doing. Sorry. Yeah, let's see. Okay, that's yours. Okay, so
Boy.
so the cost, we don't know the cost. We're going back to number 4. We don't know the cost, so we're still. Is there any other company or anything that can do these, or do we have to go through that group?
They're not providing a quote for, they don't do the inventory. What they're providing is an estimate so that we can gauge how much are we going to ask city council for, how
Right.
much are we going to go out and look for a grant for. That's the information question mark that we need to know in order to be able to move forward.
So I guess what I was asking is there any company, they said they had 2 staff. Is there any companies out there that are other than going through them that could give us an estimate? Is what I'm
We
asking.
could request quotes, but we don't have any actual project at this point.
Okay.
So I don't.
Okay,
know that
gotcha.
we-
All right, so we'll wait until we hear from them.
I'm hoping in the next month, and if not, I'll
Okay.
bug them until they give me a quote.
All right. Upcoming training opportunities.
Do we have the architectural walking?
Oh, I'm sorry, architectural walking tour skipped over. Update.
So it's been some time. We had our pilot test run of the architectural walking tours in April, and the committee will be meeting next Friday to structure what the fall programming looks like. So I don't have any other advancements on the tours other than to say, thank you for your continued support, and I'll have more updates for you at the July meeting.
Right.
Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you. Okay, now the upcoming training opportunities.
So as we discussed, we wanted to have more events or more opportunities that you guys know about when different trainings are available. I just got an email this morning about an interesting opportunity with the town of Hillsborough. They're doing a historic brickwork restoration at the end of June, the 29th, from 9 to 4. So it is an all-day Saturday event in Hillsborough. So essentially it's going to be a hands-on type of training, talking about how do you clean brickwork, how do you pick the right color of grout for the historic nature of the property, things like that. I'll send this slideshow out. You can look at the page and see if that's something that you're interested in. If so, let me know. There's a $25 fee, so you'd have to be able to commit to that whole day and be interested in the programming. And there's a staff training budget that we might be able to pull in to fund 2 members or something to attend that. The other On a standing basis, Hillsborough also does a historic guided walking tour, just to see what that looks like in their neck of the woods. I think it would be interesting to go on as a group if you wanted to set that up. It's June 22nd. It's not the next date, but the date after that, because I figured we needed some lead time on organizing that. And then I think it was one of the commission members' recommendations to attend another community's HRC meeting and see how they operate. So I pulled some dates for neighboring municipalities, HRC work sessions. The one in Burlington is the same night as our HRC meetings, so I'm not sure that really matches up with, would be a good fit. And the one in Winston starts fairly early at 4 o'clock. So yeah, it would be challenging to get us all there if people work. So Hillsborough, we're doing a lot in Hillsborough if we do all of these things, but Hillsborough had a 7 p.m. timeline, and their next one is in August. So just some things to think about. I'll send out maybe a dual poll if there's anyone, one of these that you guys gravitate towards. We can make decisions tonight if you want.
What is the length of time for the walking tour field trip in Hillsborough?
So walking tour in Hillsborough, it's at 11 to 12:30. It's on a Saturday, so that's like an hour and a half or so. But if we wanted to carpool there, carpool back, that's probably a 3-hour round trip.
What date was that?
22nd.
Of June.
It's a week from this Saturday, yeah. Is there a deadline for that, or you just?
No, you just show up, and these happen fairly regularly. So if this isn't enough lead time, there's another one like the following month.
Well, you got slice of summer that day, so how many of us are committed to that?
And I didn't think about that. So we can move it to
July it is.
July. Although that's a hot time to go do a walking tour.
Yes.
Does anyone want to make a recommendation for fall?
October. Love October.
Yeah, September, October might be better. Do they do it the same week every month?
I believe so. It seemed like they did it like twice a month, which seemed excessive, but I'll look into.
Maybe they pick a different section to go to each time.
I don't know if they do the same one or a different one. I didn't see
That's
the
a-
route.
That's a lot of town to see in an hour and a half. I think they probably do it.
Historically. Yes.
Mhm. So maybe shoot for a September timeframe and get you a date, and then we can come together.
Swing right into home.
As far as the brickwork restoration, just let me know if anyone's interested on that one. I would love to see something like that come here and invite our developers and people that actually do work on these buildings to come see how a professional works on those.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Would that be possible?
I think, well, considering there's a fee for this event, I'm sure they had to pay that individual to come teach it. If we could have some kind of fee, or maybe find some funds somewhere else in a budget somewhere, or make a request, we might be able to find someone to, or even that same person. I've already reached out to the planner there to ask, who is your trainer, and see if they would be able to come and how much that would run. So depending on cost, I think that would be really an interesting way to get public engagement,
Right.
Got
education.
an e-blast to some of the other.
That'd be cool.
Or even a collaboration with the Burlington's
Right.
Historic Commission and the Graham Historic Commission, and even maybe the county's Historic Commission, just kind of Alamance County as a whole.
Sounds good.
So I will pursue getting some numbers behind what that would look like.
Public education ideas?
I just wanted to keep this at the forefront of our minds in terms of what are our projects that we could do as a commission to continue to educate, outside of this room. These were just throw it at the wall kinds of ideas, but if you guys have suggestions, send me an email or we can start seeing what that looks like. One of the ideas that was in the work plan was working with the Historical Museum Advisory Board on some kind of architectural exhibit, 1 or 2 posters about some of our more prominent buildings with architectural features that are distinct.
Cool. Review of interlocal agreement with the county. How's that going?
This was fun. So I got an email with a copy of what the county's interlocal agreement looks like with other HRCs. The highlight is that we would be eligible if we signed this agreement to have state grant funds through the CLG grant, but we'd be giving up all the things that you guys do in terms of reviewing COAs, any other current functions of the HRC, and ceding that to the county, essentially.
What's the point of having an HRC in Grand? What would be our
That's
function?
exactly, they would not have a function. They would be giving that function over to the county is essentially what the signing that agreement would say. I'm not sure that that is the intent behind.
What's the value in
So
being-
have we talked to the staff about it, or is it just something that they sent, or who is the staff?
It's the county planning department. I just asked for it because we were thinking about pursuing this route if
Right.
that was the only way to get funding, not realizing that it came with a whole bunch of strings attached to that
Right.
eligibility. So
Is there a
I'm-
value in us not being affiliated with them, not having the interlocal agreement?
Well, it was just for us to get grant money.
Get some money.
Well, is that my point? Yeah. Is that the only way we can get?
well, that's the only way we would be eligible for that fund since we were denied CLG status for that grant. Now, alternatives to that, there's one other foundation, Covington Foundation, that I know that funds that in the state. They're out of Greensboro. What level they fund projects at, I don't know. I've tried to get in touch with them. They're a little bit more difficult to get in touch with. Applications are due in March and August, so they have 2 time frames for their grants being due.
Okay.
So I'm just throwing out there, what
Maybe let's try to look into that, see if
So we
we
need to
can.
go back to what was holding us back from getting our CLG.
CLG status, and the thing that they seemed to imply was the biggest barrier was the inventory, which is what we were trying to get funding
funding
for. So
for.
we're in a big giant
Right.
loop.
So a Covington grant, is that
A what?
Covington?
The Covington grant, it's a possibility. Like I said, I don't know at what level, how much money they have in their pot and how much they're wanting to use it towards inventories versus a restoration type project.
Sure. Okay. Always that way, isn't it?
Yeah, so unfortunately, that sounds like not great news for us on that front. We can continue to talk with Amber about, look, we're trying to do the right thing. How do we
Right.
Do it.
How do we do it? And
Right. Okay, thank you, Alexis. Melody, do you have anything?
I have a couple. One, you do have a new member, who I hope will show up next month. looking at the application, I think we got you a good one, we hope. So I'm hoping that will go well for you. The city council did approve, so that you'll know, did approve for me to pursue the review of boards and commissions with the task force that I started. So we will be continuing that. We could meet as early as the last week of this month to start that process again. I have a 3-month window in which to report back to them, one way or the other, of what we've done, to either give them an update or go back to them with the completed information and documentation that they may vote on. So we'll see how quickly we can move. I don't want to see it drag forever, so 3 months was an okay time with me to come back to them. So we'll see how that goes. So just for that information, I will go back and check in with all the folks that were on the original task force and that I met with, and ask if they are still willing to meet. If so, we'll continue with that group. If so, then I'll be filling in a couple of spots. There are folks that don't want to do that. I think it's a great opportunity for us, and we'll be working on some things, trying to find the information. I will be from now until then, trying to do some research and come up with some things from other cities that may additionally help us make some good judgment decisions on what we're doing. My job, and because of the newspaper article, let me say, my job is not to give you answers or to make you do anything that is my will. I am simply facilitating.
We know that.
This group and trying to come to a means that is good for the city. So just FYI, if anybody asks you, my job is to facilitate. We made that very clear, this group, and to try to get the answers that we need in something positive. The last thing, I would not give up hope on your money for inventory, or the city council members are very aware that there needs to be an inventory done of architectural inventory, as well as the business inventory. So they are very much aware of that. I will tell you that there has been some discussion, and I will look at you all, stop at that point, look at you all and go, discussion, that we are in the process of getting ready to sell the property that we've been looking at for a while. That was the cousin's property. We've accepted that. The sale has not gone through. It has been discussed in an open forum that if we go through that sale, there are some things this board would like to see happen with that money. And I'm not out of order to tell you that inventories have been one of those things that have come up. So that should give you a slight bit of hope, I hope that it does. But please note that the city council is aware and that we're informed of what we feel like we need to go forward, and we feel like this may be an opportunity to fund some one-time kinds of things that would push us forward. So you heard me not say any commitment of any strict form or fashion, but I am telling you that there was honestly discussion, and any of them will tell you that same thing. So, and that was in a public forum. So, hopefully that will happen, and we should be able to help both, I hope, this committee and Mary's economic development thing. I can also tell you that during the passing of the budget this year, there were a couple of things added to the budget that we requested outside the normal budget. There was $2,000 given to the Historical Museum to assist with projects such as lighting and electrical things that had not been completed prior to that building because there was absolutely zero funding for that facility in the budget. The City Council also approved a $5,000 sum to the economic development process, which was not even a hair of what was requested, but we felt that we were in a position to move forward and felt hopeful about the sale of the property. So we're going to kind of leave it at that. But we are trying. We're working at it.
Right.
So hopefully I'll be able to give you some other information in the next month or so.
And that budget is approved in July.
It is approved now and it will be effective July 1st.
Thank you.
The sale of the property, I think, should go through, if not this week, next week. So I'm sure that the council will probably have a discussion by the July meeting or at the July meeting. I'm sure it will come up at some point.
Right. Thank you, Melody.
Certainly.
Is there any additional items? Mary?
If you guys will pencil in on your calendar for July 11th, that'll be when our consulting for the small area plan tool returns back to town. More details will be sent out. It will be an evening engagement. So details are still being developed, but the date is set, July 11th.
Great.
And that's really the unveiling of what the recommendations are. Not that all those recommendations will be adopted by council, but those are the recommendations that they'll be submitting to council.
Okay. Any other additional information? I want to thank the staff. Thank you all for going through this meeting tonight, and we appreciate it. And so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Second. I'll approve.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. We're closed for the evening. Adjourned.
Wait.
Carrie,